Hello and welcome. I'm Julia Barbaro, host of the Julia and Gino podcast. I'm here with the co-founder of Jake and Gino, my husband and co-host, Gino Barbaro.
Julia, special day today. How you doing?
Excellent.
It is my wife's birthday today. She is 39 years old, and she looks amazing because she's lived a quarter of a century with this guy. And I mean, living with me really ages you. You've done it graciously. You've done it wonderfully. I'm proud. It's an honor, a privilege to have you sitting next to me. And by showing my undying love, I'm going to sing you a little song.
Oh my gosh.
Parla più piano e nessuno sentirà. Il nostro amore lo viviamo io e te. Nessuno sa la verità, neppure il cielo che ci guarda da lassù. Insieme a te. I hope you enjoyed that, Julia.
That was great. Just to be clear, 39 was a good age.
Okay. You look amazing. Anyway, today's guest, Julia, is Jason Evert. He's a best-selling author of more than 15 books, including How to Find Your Soulmate Without Losing Your Soul. As the co-founder of the Chastity Project with his wife, Kristalina, they've traveled to 6 continents to bring the message of purity to millions of people for more than 20 years. Thank you, Jason, for listening to that, and I want to welcome you to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on.
I don't even know what to say. I don't know where to go right now. But Jason, I listened to you for many years, and my husband, I just sent him over a couple of your videos, and he was just amazed on your knowledge, on how you speak. And I know one of your topics, obviously, is chastity. And I kind of want to start there before we dive into anything. But I just do want to make a little note, is that Jason wrote 15 books.
So he's crushing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm quitting. He's got 8 kids. I've only got 6. He's got 15 books. I've got 5. I mean, what's going on here?
I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah,
I'm just pointing it out.
Yes. Okay. Thanks,
so
Jill.
when the word chastity comes up, what do people normally think of? But what is the real meaning?
Yeah, it has got a lot of baggage associated with it. People either think of some like negative, prudish, neurotic attitude toward our sexuality, or they confuse it with celibacy, which means the state of not being married, or they confuse it with just abstinence, which is just the absence of sex. It just seems like a negative, kind of like a void. And so it's got a lot of a cringe effect of the word, but I don't think the word should be avoided because of all the baggage. John Paul II wrote a book called Love and Responsibility, and he said the word chastity needs to be rehabilitated. And so he said chastity can only be thought of in association with the virtue of love. And I think what he meant by that is that the function of chastity is to free love from a utilitarian attitude, meaning to free love from selfishness. Because if I can't say no to my sexual impulses, then saying yes to them means absolutely nothing. And so it's that virtue of chastity or purity of heart that frees me to authentically love, but then it also frees you to know if you're being loved. And how does it do that? I think of a high school girl I met once who was dating this controlling, possessive, abusive older guy, treated her like garbage. I said, sweetheart, you deserve a lot better than him, and just break up with him. And she said, I can't break up. I've given him everything, my virginity, my reputation. I can't let go of everything. And I said, look, I know it's hard, but just tell him no more sex. Watch what happens. She said, okay, I can do that. And she took off her necklace and gave it to me. And she said, he makes me wear this. He's so possessive. I said, okay, I'll throw it away for you. And she left. And in 5 minutes, she came back, happy as can be. She said, I dumped him. I said, well, that was quick. She said, yeah, I told him no more sex, and he slammed his locker shut. He threw a book at me. He said, where's your necklace? She said, I gave it to the chastity guy. And so you see, like, she just tested his love. Like, do you love me? Do you want me? Or do you just want the pleasure you're getting from me? And so it's this virtue of chastity that frees us to love and frees us to know if we're authentically being loved by using sexuality according to God's plan for it.
How does a woman find the right man?
Well, I think she got to find herself first. I think that's the most important step. A friend of mine says, become the woman of your dreams and you'll attract the man of your dreams. And so the goal is never to like, I got to find the perfect person. Is she the one? Is she the one? Is that the one? Is this the one? Because if we're spending all of our effort and anxiety and energy trying to find some perfect person to attach to, like some host organism, we got it backwards. We got to focus, okay, how do I grow in perfection as myself? How do I grow in the virtues? How do I discover what God is calling me to be? And if I can get busy doing that, I'm most likely to attract the type of person that's going to, be able to build a healthy marriage and family with me. Because if you had one person that was trying to do that, growing in perfection, and another person was just trying to find the perfect person, and then they met, like at first it seemed great. Oh, what a perfect fit. But as the years and months went on, it would get painfully obvious that one of them had invested all of the time in growing in perfection, while the other just wanted somebody attached to. And so we've got to, instead of spending all our effort looking for some perfect person to complete us, we got to look at, okay, who does God want me to be and what does he want me to do? And if we can all just get busy doing that, I think we're more likely to find the person that we hope to find.
Mm.
Jason, isn't it hard and challenging for a lot of people because you're presupposing that we have to love ourselves, love thyself as thy neighbor, and a lot of us don't love ourselves. And it took me a while to actually say, I mean, I know exteriorly I'll tell my wife, yeah, I'm awesome, I rock and all, but deep down inside, we all have trauma, we all feel like we're broken, we all feel like we're fallible. So isn't that where we're going to start? I can't love my wife truly and fully unless I really love myself. And isn't that where it's really challenging for us, a lot of us, to actually think in those terms?
Yeah, and I think we need to heal our idea of what love is. Love isn't necessarily liking. Love is not necessarily having an infatuation with yourself. Like, wow, I just think I'm the best thing ever. Love is to will the good of another. And so you've got to start there of like, look, I don't have to be real happy with myself because I made some dumb decisions or I know I've got these faults, but I have to will my own good. I've got to realize that I deserve to be in relationships that aren't toxic. I've got to realize that if I'm wrestling with something, I'm in kind of a period of desolation in my life. I need real consolation, not the false stuff. So I can't be running to porn and empty relationships and drinking and, just as they call bed rot, where you're just sitting in your bed with a cell phone for hours in a day. I can't run to that stuff. I've got to realize that, okay, I need consolation. Maybe I need to be connected more to my family, to my community, to my parish, to my God. Maybe I need to sleep 8 hours a night at least. Maybe I need to start eating better. Maybe I need to work out 5-6 days a week. Like, take care of those basic things. Love yourself by doing what's good for yourself. And the battles that come, I think, are going to be a lot more manageable.
Mm. Do you think I'm noticing in my young age of, what did you call me, 39?
Yeah, it's close to 39. But you look more like you're 20. I'm telling you, baby, you're rocking it.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to be honest. Am I 48? Is that how old I am?
I don't even know.
I think I am.
It's just a number.
Everyone gives me different ages, so I'm not sure. The interesting thing that I'm, because Gino and I know you also got married younger. I was 23. You were 28 when we got married. And I'm noticing that lately, a lot of people are not getting married. I mean, they're well into their 30s, sometimes into their 40s. They're living together. Maybe they're even engaged for years and years and years. I mean, I know someone that was literally engaged for 9 years. And so what's happening? What's going on nowadays? Because I'm kind of confused. Usually I'm in people's face when they do that. I'm like, isn't
so
she
annoying.
worth
It's
it?
actually embarrassing. Actually, I got to walk away. And I'm like, please stop talking. Leave them alone.
Gino. We're at like a real estate conference, and people are like, "Oh yeah, we're engaged." I'm like, "That's amazing. When's the wedding?" Probably in about 5 years. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, like, what's going on?"
Yeah, no, engagement is not supposed to feel like the 40 years Moses spent wandering in the wilderness with the Israelites. Like we're getting married next presidency or something. It's like, what's going on here? I mean, what you perceived is reality. This is the first time in the history of the United States where the majority of American citizens are not married. This has never happened in the history of our country, where most people in the nation are single. And as you said, they're cohabiting, or they're just putting off marriage in favor of a career first, or this or that. I think a lot of these people are doing it not because they don't value marriage, but because they don't really know if it's a realistic option for them. Because they think, okay, my parents' marriage was a dumpster fire. It was a train wreck. And that is the last thing I want to ever put my kids through. So maybe I just won't have kids. Maybe I won't get married. That's how I'll divorce-proof myself, is I'll just never give myself to another. And if I do give myself to someone else, we got to test drive it first. We're going to, shack up, live together for a while, see if that works out. And they kind of get stuck in this rut. And so instead of like deciding into marriage, they end up kind of just sliding into marriage. And as a result, these marriages typically do have a higher divorce rate, do have a higher rate of infidelity and domestic abuse and things like that. And so we've got to realize the solution is real marriage preparation. When the church talks about that, it's not like 6 months before we get married. Okay, we got to engage, we got to call the priest, do the, no. Marriage preparation, according to Pope Francis, begins at birth. And so we need that remote and that proximate and that immediate marriage preparation. But it's got to be going on in junior high and high school. The restoration of marriage as an institution of it. It isn't just a piece of paper. People say, oh, marriage is a piece of paper. Well, if it is, I mean, you got to think, okay, well, people get married have better sex lives, they live longer, they earn more income, their children are less likely to get involved in poverty, in crime, drop out of school, they're more likely to go on to a 4-year college. So like, if marriage is just a piece of paper, like that's an awesome piece of paper. Like I want that piece of paper. It's not about the paper. It's about the fact that we are created to make a gift of ourselves, not alone. And so only marriage, if you choose to be in a relationship, is that complete gift of self. And so the church's teachings is that the total gift of your body, of sex, should correspond to the total gift of yourself, which is marriage. And that way your body is speaking the truth. I am completely yours.
Jason, I can absolutely see about marriage what it's done to my wife, because she is transformed. I mean, the last 25 years has just been amazing. So I can see that. About being a man, the toxic, when you use the word toxic, I got triggered. The stimulus and response, I hear that word toxic and toxic masculinity. Let's talk about men, because we are at a crisis right now. And I love the video you did about, I'm not talking about this on both sides, 6'5", strapping football player. I think we're confused about what manhood is and how and how we're getting a bad rap nowadays.
Yeah, I would say that there is really no such thing as toxic masculinity, because if it was masculine, it wouldn't be toxic. I think what we're dealing with is toxic effeminacy. And what I mean by that is what St. Thomas Aquinas meant by that. He said effeminacy, not to be confused with femininity, which is a perfection. It's a good attribute for women. Not to be confused with same-sex attraction, which is a totally different topic. Effeminacy, according to Aquinas, is when a man refuses to let go of what is pleasurable in order to do what is arduous or difficult. And so it's an inordinate attachment to pleasure and an aversion from what's challenging. And so if you think about that, I think pornography has essentially effeminized an entire generation of men. They might be all machismo, at the gym, the spray on tan or whatever, and big muscles, like exterior, like looks really macho, got a sharp looking car, beautiful women, but interiorly you have affectively or emotionally a man that's very effeminate, that really doesn't know how to resist what is pleasurable to do what is arduous, difficult, and good. And so that's what's toxic, but it's not masculine. It's the opposite of masculinity.
And what's incredible about that, before you ask your question, is that is the essence of life. If you want to excel at anything, you have to give up the short term or that instant gratification and put in the work and do the effort. So if you could translate that over into your everyday.
Yeah, but what is the solution? What is the solution behind that?
Yeah, well, I think some of the online influencers that have gained a large crowd of young male followers are onto a lot of the truth of these things. Hey, get up earlier, work hard, do ice plunges. Like they're onto a lot of stuff that's kind of shaking the guys out of their stupor. But it's not that they're going too far. They're just not going far enough. It's just like, okay, conquer the world, but don't conquer yourself. And so we can win this kind of exterior jihad of I lifted more weights, I bought a more expensive car, I got this beautiful girlfriend, I've got my mansion, like exteriorly, I'm conquering the world. But the problem is I haven't conquered myself. I haven't really grown in the virtues. I haven't overcome vice. I'm still a really self-absorbed human person, and I tend to be pretty materialistic and lustful. It's like we're exteriorizing this holy war that needs to be taking place and thinking, okay, I'm winning out there. So if I can't even say no to the smallest temptations, well, that doesn't matter because, I've got a 7-figure bank account. And so we've got to realize it's the interior holy war that makes a man truly masculine.
And can you dive into that a little bit farther? I have the question here: how do you become a man? How do you raise young men in this generation?
Well, I think God has kind of revealed in our bodies, not only our identities at male and female, but our calling. And so you look at a man's body, and what it tells you is that, okay, that man, he's been given the strength to initiate the gift of life-giving love. It's kind of his calling is stamped into his own anatomy. And so, okay, God has given us strength, and not just physical strength, but what do you use strength for? Well, you use it not only to protect and to guard, and not to dominate, but to serve, and ultimately to sacrifice. And so it's not about conquering a woman for the sake of myself. It's more conquering myself for the sake of the woman. And so that's the proper use of the strength. And also this gift of initiating the gift of life-giving love, not initiating sterile lust or initiating nothing because I'm afraid I might get rejected or I'm going to be all tied down with commitments and burdens, like this false notion of freedom. John Paul II said, freedom exists for the sake of love. It exists to be given away. And if my notion of freedom is like women are a ball and chain and kids are just game over, I'm not free. I've just become a slave to my own selfishness.
Happy wife, happy life. One of the stupidest comments and one of the stupidest things I could possibly hear. I despise that. What about you?
Tell me why you despise it.
Because I can't make you happy. I have to make myself happy, and then from myself being happy, you'll want to be around me.
Yeah.
And if my only ideal is to make you happy, that's not what part of the relationship is. So,
what's your thought on that, Jason? When you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we want our spouses to be happy. And it's not that Gino's questioning that. Obviously he wants a happy spouse, but
just to put it out there, I completely agree with the both of you. And it's me that hates the term more than my husband, but go ahead.
Yeah, in this idea of just cower to the wife, give her whatever the heck she wants. And so then you're going to be happy because she's not going to get always angry about you for just constantly giving her whatever she wants. That's a really narcissistic relationship, what's going on there. I've just got to feed whatever she wants and then she'll behave really good and then I'll be happy. It's like, well, no, when you love someone, there's a Bible verse in the book of Proverbs that says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. And it's a peculiar passage because like faithful are the wounds of a friend. And the way I look at that is if somebody stabs you, like, are they your friend? Well, it depends. Like if it's a surgeon and he's stabbing you to bring out some tumor in your body, it's an act of charity. Obviously, if they're stabbing you with gossip and things like that, okay, well, that's not an act of love, or they're mugging you or whatever. But there's a way to wound one another in a loving way. That sometimes I need to say things that are hard. Sometimes we need to have a little healthy pushback, that I'm not just some doormat that's going to do whatever you want so that you can be happy at my expense. I mean, if you had two people living in that, it's such a broken dynamic. It might seem like a harmonization, but it's a harmonization of egoism, and it never escapes out of that. And so we've got to be willing the good of the other, not simply for my own sake, but for what is good for them. And it's not good for them for me just to be a doormat, but for me rather to let my needs come to the surface. Say, hey, I need this in order to be happy. Well, I need this. Well, hey, let's try to meet each other's needs because we love each other, not just because of what I can get out of trying to appease you.
Yeah. And in your experience, I'm sure you know people like that. We know plenty of people like that where one or the other, well, mostly I guess the happy wife type of thing. What's the solution in there? Like, is there hope for those people that have been married who knows how long, and you just watched it all these years?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we've got to realize is we got to grow up a little bit and say, okay, I'm responsible for my own happiness. It's not your job to make me happy. It's my job to learn how to do authentic self-care of like, okay, what brings me joy? Does it bring me joy to, get up early and go for a jog? Does it bring me joy to do this? And obviously if that gets to such a point where it's impinging upon the well-being of the family, well, I got to do me to be happy and trample on everybody else. That's not healthy. But then we also have to avoid this opposite extreme of like, you're in charge of my happiness. And if I'm not happy, it's probably something you did wrong. It's like, oh, no. Own yourself. Learn what makes you happy and bring that joy into the family. And so if two people are doing this, I think at the service of love, and they want to put each other first, but they know how to make themselves happy, I think that can create a really healthy dynamic. But if it's just like, hey, I'm grumpy. I must be grumpy because of something you did. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, are you doing self-care on your own? Like, do you know what really makes you happy and brings you joy? And can we carve out some time in our lives for you to be free to do that? To me, that's a much more healthier dynamic. And that's why I think couples who are dating need to be real sober about this. Okay, are there some serious issues here that if they didn't change, our marriage would be disastrous? Like, am I getting married hoping that is going to solve these problems? Because a lot of people will enter into deeper layers of commitment hoping it'll resolve previous problems. Well, he does this, but maybe if we sleep together, then he'll stop doing that. Oh, well, I know there's this really unhealthy thing, but if we get engaged, maybe it'll go away. Maybe if we live together, then he'll stop doing that. Like, no. You don't want to move forward hoping they'll change. You only want to move forward hoping they're going to stay the way they are. Otherwise, you're just dating your imagination. You're not even really dating a person. You're just dating a project.
That's awesome. Because we do that a lot of times. Is like, well, when this happens, everything will be better. And I think that's a huge mistake on our part, especially when it's our soon-to-be spouse. I don't know, because you're just sitting next to me. Jason. I want to go into your family dynamics, but before that, we talk a lot. I feel like we've had a lot of people talking about men on this podcast. So I'm curious your take of women, because a lot of women, they don't have the right message of their worth and their value. And I heard you say something once, maybe you'll say it today, I don't know. But what's your view of women and what should we be knowing about ourselves?
Aspiring towards?
Yeah. Well, one is I don't think you want to enter a relationship where you need to change who you authentically are to appease the other person. I remember meeting a young woman and she said, "Yeah, my boyfriend, he really gets irritated because of how talkative I am and I'm always laughing and I'm always doing this and I'm into these things. And do you think I should change to keep this guy?" And I said, no. I said, that's the worst thing you could possibly do, to try to morph into someone you're not to appease a guy who doesn't love you for who you are. I said, the very thing that will kind of turn off the wrong kind of guy will be the very precise thing that attracts the right kind of guy. Because the right guy for you is going to want to have these conversations. He's going to love your effervescence and your attitude. Like, that's going to attract the right guy. And so don't change who you are. That being said, I think women obviously are under a lot of challenges when it comes to dating and relationships today. I think some mistakes are just putting off serious commitment and being like, oh, I'll settle down in my 30s. I'll settle down later on. I'm going to do this stuff and hook up and go to the bars and clubs and have a lot of fun. But then when that season's finished and you're in your mid 30s, like, okay, let's find a good guy. Wait a minute, where are all the good guys? Yeah, they got married like 10 years ago. And then you think, okay, well, men are the problem. It's like, well, maybe you just didn't take your own vocation seriously enough. And so you've got to discern, what is God calling me to in my life? Is it religious life? Is it married life? And if so, dating is marital discernment. You're not dating for recreation. You're not dating because you're bored or you're lonely. And as soon as you discern this guy is not going to be the father of my kids, this is not the man I want to spend the rest of my life with, then you need to get out of that as soon as possible. And just because a relationship is hard to end, it doesn't mean you're supposed to stay in it. Sometimes breakups are going to be difficult, but what's more difficult, I think, than breaking off a relationship is staying in the wrong relationship. And not only for the next couple months, but sometimes getting anchored into one of these things for a lifetime and then looking back and thinking, what could have been? And so I know this road could be long, and I know it can be frustrating for single women. Like, look, no, I wasn't clubbing and I wasn't sleeping around. And I've tried to follow God's path for my life. And here I am, 32 years old and still looking for Mr. Right. Should I lower my standards? And what I would say is that, look, I know it's disappointing, it's frustrating, but it's much better thing to be disappointed in some guys than to be disappointed in yourself for settling for a guy who's only half of the man that you deserve. And so try to keep those standards high as heaven, to not give up hope, and not to turn to false consolations or more lower your morals. Because if you want to date, I mean, I could get you a date in 5 minutes. I'm sure there's some app we could figure out, throw it up there, and you guys would have a line of cars in front of your house in 5 minutes. But that's quantity. It's not quality. And so keep your standards high as heaven, trust in God, because I know this can be quite a bit of a white martyrdom as you're waiting on God and wondering, well, what the heck, God? Like, if you're all loving and you're all powerful, how come I'm not getting what I want? And it can be very difficult. But know during this trial that God is giving you the gift of faith, taking you through this dark night, through this desert, because whatever vocation he calls you to, you're going to need that gift of faith. And so sometimes he gives it to us through trials.
In one of your videos, you're talking about how to let people in. The castle becomes the cage, and the cage becomes the coffin. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we get wounded, we get betrayed, trauma, and hurts, the natural reflex is just protection. Like, that ain't going to happen again. And so it typically starts with, like, you get a wound, you break your arm, it goes in a cast. Okay, that's supposed to be there. It's a healthy reaction. There's a time of healing that needs to take place. But eventually, when the bones strengthen, the cast gets removed and, the muscles are weakened. It's a little more vulnerable and weak. But you can do some physical therapy and you build back. The unhealthy response is like when you've been brokenhearted. Well, boom, you not only create this cast, but you create like this castle of like, nobody's going to do that to me again. But this castle becomes like a cage, like a prison, and eventually it just becomes a coffin. What's meant by that is the very thing you want the most, which is love, requires the thing you fear the most, which is vulnerability. And so instead of learning how to be safely vulnerable, of discerning which guys are trustworthy, which guys are not, how do I surround myself with people whose opinions I love and admire and respect, and I've got accountability, and I can bring him around them. What do you think about this guy? And so you're not deciding all by yourself. So instead of learning those strategies for healthy discernment of when you should be vulnerable, with whom you should be vulnerable, the solution is that's all too confusing and it's scary. And so boom, the guard goes up. And some of these women will literally have like no boundaries around their body, but a fortress around their heart. You can see her body, but you can't see her. It's almost like she's hiding behind her own nakedness. offering guys what they're least likely to reject out of fear that if they really peered into her, that they would reject her. And that's a wound she can't afford to feel. And so she just keeps these relationships at a superficial level instead of doing the deep dive of healing that's needed for her to be able to give and receive the love that God created for her.
And what's the first step in that healing?
Well, you got to own your stuff. Like you got to face it, own it, heal it. Maybe that means going to counseling. Maybe that means, okay, I went to counseling. I didn't like counselor. Okay, shop around, find another one. Don't like that one, find another. Okay, this one I like. Okay, now invest the heavy lifting of therapy, of going in there. A friend of mine says that your mind is like a bad neighborhood. Don't go in there alone. And so bring some company in there. Like, yeah, why am I getting hung up on these guys that I don't even want to be with in the first place? Like, why am I getting into these dead-end hookup relationships? Why do I always end up dating guys who treat me like garbage? Okay, let's find the answer to that question. What's your relationship with your dad look like? When did this stuff start? When did these patterns of relationship begin? Have you suffered trauma when you were 12 years old and then learned from that you're just not worth protecting, that you're not worth fighting for? Like, let's go to the roots of these issues instead of dealing with just the fruit, because the rotten fruit of the hookups or the body dysmorphia or the eating disorders or any of this stuff, that's just the fruit, but that's typically growing off of a stem, which is a lie of I'm unlovable, I'm undesirable, I'm unwanted, I'm not worth protecting, all those lies. But those lies have their roots deep in a soil, often of trauma or broken family dynamics or things like that. And if all we're doing is kind of snipping at these fruit, wait another season, they're going to be back up, because we're not going to renounce the lies and we're not going deeper than them down to the roots. Because once we heal that root structure and we start disturbing that and reseeding it, then we're going to see different fruit in our life. And so that's the work of therapy, going down, just binding and breaking these lies, going down to the wounds, doing some heavy lifting there. And that is the greatest gift you can not only give to yourself, but to your future spouse and kids, to kind of face it, own it, and heal it.
Love it.
You use the word dysphoria, so it's a great pivot for me, because I was really attracted to your videos when you talked about the transgender, the ideology, and trying to be a little bit more compassionate. And you use the word dysphoria and opposing with euphoria. Can we talk about the gender dysphoria and how we actually have a conversation about this topic? Because this is it's very difficult to have a rational, logical, emotionless conversation, but we need to have these conversations because we need to understand the other side and we need to show that compassion.
Yeah, we've got to walk carefully, because I think a lot of Catholics have maybe one or two responses to this whole issue. It's either to kind of just dismiss it or just debate it. Basically, like to dismiss it. Wait, is this, non-binary, gender fluid, trans woman? What a bunch of crock. I mean, you're either XX or XY. That's all there is to it. But if you're on the receiving end of that, and you've wrestled with gender dysphoria long before TikTok came to be, this has been part of your story, and you hear a Catholic just mocking and dismissing it, it's like, okay, well, I know who not to open up to: Catholics. And there's no room for me in your church and in your pews to navigate through these struggles in my own life. And so where am I going to turn? Well, some online LGBT community forum where they celebrate me and congratulate me for my braveness of transitioning from puberty blockers to cross-sex hormones and these different gender-affirming hysterectomies or this or that. That's my new home. And so that's why when we touch on this subject, and sometimes you experience like an anaphylactic reaction from the other person, it's because you're not just debating an ideology. What we're really looking at here is an identity, a community, and a sense of mission. And if they feel they're being stripped of all of those things, because like, wait a minute, I found my identity. These new words I've discovered resonate with my lived experience. And I found this community of support of people who unconditionally love me. When my Catholic parents basically kicked me to the curb when they found out that I was, wrestling with these things. And now I have this sense of mission too, as this victimized minority. There's a lot of weight behind identity, community, and mission. And if they feel that we're stripping all those things away from them, they're likely to just walk, just forget this. You guys are nothing but haters that just want to erase me, and you just wish we were all dead and we didn't exist. And so what we got to do is kind of hit the pause button and listen for a little bit. I know one evangelical pastor, he said, look, if you meet someone who identifies as trans, what do you say to them? You say to them, look, I feel like I'm meeting you in chapter 8 of your life, but I haven't had the opportunities to learn about chapters 1 through 7, but I'd really like to. Can we have coffee sometime? Mm-hmm. And so let's begin by listening, asking good questions, instead of just saying, oh, this is a debate, let's try to win it.
Jason, if the parents listening to this and they have a child going through gender dysphoria, I mean, what would your suggestions be? How would you have that conversation with that child?
Yeah. Well, first off, if we have a website called chastity.com. If you go to chastity.com/gender, you're going to find a whole host of resources from blogs and podcasts to advocacy groups from legal organizations to counselors to parental advocacy groups of like, hey, all of our kids are going through this. Let's talk. What strategies are working for you? What strategies have been counterproductive for you? Get plugged into some of these family networks. All that stuff you can find at chastity.com/gender. But as a parent, realize this is going to be a bit of a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint. It's not about telling your kid, hey, here's your wrong, and this is why. Start asking some thoughtful questions. Okay, what do you mean by the word gender? Can you explain that word to me without reference like gender stereotypes? What do you mean by that word? When did you start feeling this way? And you know what? Thank you for telling me about this, because I know that was probably really scary to open up to me, because you're probably afraid that if you told me that I would scream at you and like tell you just need to go to confession for struggling with this. Thanks for confiding in me, but please be patient with me because a lot of these terms are new for me. And if I stumble across any, I misunderstand you, we're going to work through this together. And I want you to know I love you and I'm never going to stop loving you. But I'm going to challenge you on some of these thoughts. And I want you to challenge me, like, let's work on this together. They need to hear, okay, this person might not have all the answers, but they're willing to walk with me in love. And in time, we can lovingly challenge some of these belief systems that my body is meaningless and that my body is not me and that the true me is something other than my body. We can work on that integration of the human person. Start bringing up evidence of what puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones do, evidence of why all the Scandinavian countries that led the way on this have now done an abrupt U-turn and are going in the opposite direction. Why are those countries who've been doing this for decades longer than we have all running in the opposite direction?
Are they really? They're really going. They're really changing their.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Amsterdam, Sweden, Finland, Norway. The biggest gender clinic in the United Kingdom was just shut down this spring. 35 of their psychologists quit before they even shut down because they're like, we're not being allowed to explore the deeper psychological issues. We're just supposed to rubber stamp these kids as trans and then transition them, when they actually did an audit of the kids coming in there and found that 98% of them had coexisting comorbidities of different mental health issues. 98% of them. And that stuff of autism, OCD, trauma, depression, none of that stuff was getting taken care of. It's just like, oh, you're trans, let's put you on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. 35 of their psychologists quit. One of them actually, before the place was shut down, he was dealing with a group of clients who had transitioned through surgery and were still having a lot of issues in their life. And then he had another patient group he was working with who were contemplating transition as adolescents. And so he thought, well, what would happen if I just took my two groups I'm meeting with and just put them together and just give them a chance to talk and share their stories? You know what happened when the transitioners met with those wanting to transition? 98% of the kids who previously wanted to transition decided, I don't think I needed to go through that anymore. 98% of them desisted after seeing where it eventually led. And so there has been a huge U-turn. And granted, it's not a conservative utopia over in Scandinavia by any measure, but they have vastly restricted young people's access to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones because they realize there is a huge lack of data and all these promises of how psychologically well these kids are going to be afterwards. Now the long-term studies are starting to surface, and the results are, to put it at least, extremely worrisome.
Wow. I kind of want to go into your family. All of the stuff we're talking about, you have 8 children, and I know you've talked to how many teens do you think you've always talked to besides your family?
Somewhere between 2 and 3 million.
Okay. How is it different? You're talking to families, you're helping out these teens, and now you have them at home. I know it's the same message, but do you see, like, as you're raising your children, because we have 3 teens, maybe? I don't know what we have. But it's interesting how we have 4. Okay. It's interesting how, you have this view of the world, how they should be. I my opinion personally, I don't know if anyone knows this, but I don't think you should date until you're ready to get married. I haven't actually said that out loud to my kids, but that's just what they followed, and I think they're definitely more advanced than I was when I was younger. But how do you talk, you and your wife? Like, what are the dynamics between you and your wife and how you talk to your children about all this?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty outspoken when it comes to dating, that like the purpose of dating is to find a spouse. And so it's pretty pointless to date in high school, because even if you do meet a great person, well, so what? She's going to Louisiana State University next year. You're going to UCLA. What are you going to have, like a long distance 5-year relationship while she's meeting 30,000 college guys, and then she's going to get a job, in Jacksonville, and you're going to get a job in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Like, what's the long term likelihood that this thing's going to pan out? These long term, long distance relationships usually don't work, but long term, long distance friendships typically do. And so I try to explain to that, passively, it's not about just like passively delaying romance. It's about actively building the foundation of lasting love. I sometimes use the analogy that the biggest building in the world is called the Burj Khalifa. It's over in Dubai. And underneath this thing, I mean, it's the sands of the Middle East. But how do they keep this huge structure on sand? Well, hundreds of thousands of tons of concrete. And to me, that's like the foundation of friendship underneath romantic love. And so if we don't take the time to really build that, and we just run, oh, you're cute, he's cute, let's jump in, typically these relationships take off like a rocket and they come down like one. And so we want the teens to see it. We're not trying to like get you not to love. We're just trying to be your allies in building a love that's truly going to last.
Wow.
I love that.
We've been speaking for over 30 minutes. We could talk to Jason. I could talk to him for the next 2 hours. I mean, this has been...
Well, I have another question.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is
it's
that
your
okay?
birthday, so shoot away, baby.
I want to know about you and your wife. How long have you been married?
20 years.
That's amazing. Okay. 20 years of marriage, you have gone through a lot, and I'm sure everyone looks at you like you got it all together. This guy, Jason, he knows how to be a father.
He's talking 2 million people,
I
15
know.
books,
You know what I
8
mean?
kids. I mean, the guy is a rock star. What are you
Yes.
talking about?
And so people probably be like, oh, Jason, what is he talking about? Marriage and family life. He's got it all. Do you struggle, Jason?
Well, we don't have a perfect marriage because my wife's not perfect. Because if she was perfect, it's been rough.
I feel you, brother. I know exactly from talking from experience. I know what you're saying.
It'd be perfect, yeah. No, I mean, marriage has been a lot harder than I ever anticipated. And we're very open about the fact, like, we've gone to marriage counseling together throughout marriage, different points of rough patches. And we don't feel any shame in saying that, because people are like, oh, wait, like, you're the How to Find Your Soulmate Without Losing Your Soul couple, and you wrote Theology of the Body for Teens, and you went to marriage counseling. Oh my goodness, my world is shattered. It's like, yeah, and you better go to counseling too when these rough patches come, because there's no shame in saying, hey, we need a little help to figure out this stuff. And, we're not seeing eye to eye. And I remember there's one patch we're going through where we just couldn't agree on this one major issue. And it was just like, what the heck, God? And I went and I prayed, and I'm like, God, is she right or am I right? Like, just tell me, and like, we'll go there. Because like, I mean, if she's right, God, tell me, because I'm pretty sure I'm right. I mean, statistically, she could be right. I think it's a pretty slim probability, but like, if she's right, tell me that. And it's like, God cut through all that. And he said, it doesn't matter who's right, just love. And it was such a dissatisfying answer, because I really wanted to hear it from God that I was right. But it like cut through a lot of that stuff of just, this is hard work. And if we think that love and marriage is just some readily given thing, well, John Paul II said, love is a constant challenge thrown to us by God. And so the tools of being quick to forgive, even before the person asks for it, instead of be like, I'm going to pout until you give me this awesome apology. That's not going to fly. Like, I've got to forgive you before you even ask for it, because a lot of times you're not going to ask for it. Because a lot of times I don't even ask for it, because I don't think, did I really hurt you, or are you just oversensitive? It's like this stuff. I mean, that's why marriage, part of the purpose is just the sanctification of the spouses. And that's why your faults are kind of going to come to the surface like oil and water. And when that happens, we shouldn't freak out and panic. It's like, okay, this is what God intended this sacrament to do, to bring my faults to the light so they can be purified and healed. And it is a messy process. And so I think the more that young couples are told this before they get married, the less likely they are to panic when things get tough.
Yeah.
Jason, love requires vulnerability, and you were vulnerable there, and I love you for that. I mean, what a great little, ending. Where can the listeners get a hold of you? You got so many great videos and so much great content out there.
Yeah, the website is just chastity.com. So chastity.com. And that's where people can find our books, like the new one we just came out on the topic of gender. We've got ones that teach guys how to date, one for the girls on how to find the right guy for you, different ones on how to break free from pornography for guys as well as girls, all kinds of resources, even stuff for parents at chastity.com. And there you can connect with our podcast, which is Lust is Boring. You can connect with us on Instagram, on YouTube, Twitter, all of that stuff through chastity.com.
It's amazing. Good.
Jason, thanks for being on. And I'm going to end the podcast by singing to my wife again because it's her birthday again.
Please don't.
Yes.
This is like the most
Quando sono solo sogno l'orizzonte, mancan le parole. Sì, lo so che non c'è luce in una stanza quando manca il sole. Se non ci sei tu con me, con me. I love you, baby. Happy birthday, Jason. Thank you for being on. Chastity.com, everybody. Go check it out.
Thanks, Jason. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks, everybody.